Welcome back to The Bear, Season 2. This is Episode 3. It's called Sundae.
Oh.
I mean, chefs taking mental health seriously. Never been more popular than it is today.
When I was a kid,
Restaurant that people could always count.
For the many employees that have worked at the restaurant for decades, the news came as a devastating.
This is that. What is that effect where like you think that you're gonna buy a red Toyota, and then all of a sudden you're seeing a red Toyota all over the place? It's like after that conversation with her dad, like this is all she's seeing.
I just was thinking it might be good to send him somewhere wild.
wild, like...
Like Copenhagen?
Yeah, I got spots there.
I mean, I figured you would.
This is such an underrated way to stage. Like if you're going to go down the path of staging, having the chef that you're working for either connect you with one of their homies and go to that restaurant with a personal introduction and a warm handoff is so much different of an experience than just sending the cold email or showing up at the bar and trying to, ask who is the chef de cuisine here and giving your resume and I'd like to come stage here type of route. And I have two stories that kind of bring this to light. One is when I went and staged at Noma, my connection from Per Se reached out to Matt Orlando, who was the chef de cuisine at the time. And that was my in to not just getting the spot and yes, you can come stage here, but it was like when you get boots on the ground especially if you're going to go internationally, it's such a benefit to having someone that in that country to be able to either just tell you where the neighborhood that you should be staying in. You don't even have to stay with them or, they don't even need to help you in any other way. But the other story that kind of brings this to light for me is we had this really slow period at the last restaurant that I was working at. And we had the same kind of reflection of everybody could upskill themselves if different people went to different places to stage, get experience, be inspired. And so I asked my chef, hey, I really am interested in this restaurant called Frantzen. Is there a world where we know anybody there? And lo and behold, my chef, Christopher Hatuft, knew Marcus Jernmark, who was the chef de cuisine of Frantzen. They reached out and they were emailing, yes, connect you guys via CC. And then all of a sudden I'm emailing with the chef de cuisine of Frantzen to basically go and stage for a week there. And to the right cultures and organizations and chefs who are open to learning, it can be this really positive interaction because when you go stage somewhere knowing that you're going to go back somewhere else, it doesn't turn into this thing where you're jockeying for a job or you're trying to steal recipes or anything like that. It is just this very positive. I remember going through the line at staff meal and Rene Redzepi came up to me as I was going through and getting my staff meal. And he was like, so you're coming from Per Se? And I was like, well, no. I externed at Per Se. I'm still in school, blah, 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 blah. But just the fact that he was open enough to having that conversation with me versus I'm trying to extract something from them. It changed the whole dynamic. And the same thing happened with Frantzen. In the beginning, my first few days of staging there, I was just paired up with somebody. And then by the end of the week, I was running a station, working a dish off of the tasting menu, just because they knew that I had this experience and they wanted to make sure that I had a good time so that if the reverse ever wanted to happen and they wanted to send someone from Frantzen to us in Norway, we had the ability to show them that same level of hospitality. And so if you have a chef who's willing to do this for you, to make that phone call, to send that text, to send that email, to say, hey, you want to go to New York, you want to go to London, you want to go to Japan, you want to go to Australia, absolutely take advantage of it if you have the means to be able to do it. And the reverse applies. If you're an executive chef that's watching this and you have a slow period at the restaurant and you can invest in your team, find a way to make the numbers work, and you can use your Rolodex that you happen to have to get your team upskilled and inspired and come back to you and make your team and organization and menu better. I'm just such a big proponent of it, and seeing it play out in this way is absolutely accurate. This is totally how it happens. Quick 10-second reminder that we are making the push for 100,000 subscribers here on this channel. And when I say the word subscribe, YouTube is probably already lighting up the subscribe button if you aren't already a subscriber to this channel. I have an absolute blast making these videos for free for you to watch, and I would love for you to either share the channel with a friend or if you aren't subscribed already, just to hit that button for us. Thanks so much. It really means a lot, and let's get back to it. This dish though, this butternut squash, radicchio, grapefruit, rosemary combination.
Marinated.
Fucking fish. Have salt.
This was another scene where I watched it on my first go around and I was like, I don't know if I call bullshit. So the lacto fermentation scene when it was too acidic, that is a process where there's a ongoing change that's happening in the ingredient where, yeah, it could end up with higher levels of acidity than what you would want for your palate. But something like over salting a dish, these guys are they're past the point of over seasoning their food, right? And yeah, maybe they're talking about well, they're just a little bit nervous and they're overthinking it. And that's totally what's needing to play out on camera here. But when you're at this level of you're about to open a restaurant, Over salting a dish is not often what happens. It is like the way that the grapefruit and the radicchio pair off of one another that is way too bitter, and we need something else as a citrus to, maybe it's blood orange instead of grapefruit, or maybe instead of radicchio we're going to use frisee or something. Or maybe it's like, yes, we want to use radicchio, but it can't be like 2 steaks of radicchio on the plate because that just ends up, it doesn't eat right. That's too overwhelming when you eat the final composed dish.
I'm sending us out for inspiration. It's gonna take me about an hour to clean this up, and then I'll meet you at Kasama. Does that sound good?
So a couple points here, and it's worth saying this again. You get to a point when you're working in kitchens and cooking and being a chef that actually doing more cookbook reading or like banging your head against your own cutting board is actually not as productive as eating to learn and going out and experiencing a tasting menu or just ordering a giant, like spread of stuff from a place that might be even outside of the cuisine that you normally cook can be such a huge source of inspiration because you're seeing how they treat herbs, or they're seeing how they prepare their vegetables. You're seeing how they take a protein that you might use all the time, but is prepared in maybe a different way. Maybe you're the type of chef that always uses citrus when you're adding acid to a dish, and then this place happens to be using vinegar. On your menu, you might have all of your individual courses individually plated for each individual person, and you go to a place that serves something as a family style presentation, and it's like, boom, there it is. I'm absolutely a proponent for this. And going out to eat, again, with fellow coworkers where you can jam on the dishes that you're eating and what you're experiencing and how this relates to what you're working on can be incredibly productive for yourselves. And so I will admit, I never quite understood. I have worked with people in the past who like, they work in restaurants, but they don't actually like going out to eat. And that always just kind of like bugged me a little bit. That's why I make my going out to eat videos here on YouTube, because that helps me learn, that helps me process what it is that I'm consuming and experiencing. Secondly, we haven't really seen that happen all that often in this show. A restaurant that's referenced, that actually plays out in the show, that's called by name, that is in Chicago. We've seen the kind of like bait and switch with like French Laundry technically being in New York, but it's shot in a restaurant in Chicago. Kasama is a restaurant in Chicago that got all the awards in 2023. Chef Jeannie and Chef Tim are friends. I've had Chef Jeannie on the podcast. On one of their recent trips to Seattle, I had the pleasure of being able to show them around and share some meals with them. They are just some of the best people, and I am so glad that Kasama and Jeannie and Tim and their whole team is getting gassed up in this show. I can't say enough good things about Jeannie and Tim, and I haven't had the pleasure of being able to go eat at Kasama yet, but I do have a Chicago trip planned for 2024, and that is absolutely going to be on my list. I think another big reason that this is getting shouted out by name is that Kasama was incredibly involved with season 2 of The Bear. Again, you folks will have to let me know in the comments because I'm not all that familiar with what the kitchen layout is at Kasama, so it's hard for me to tell if like there's a separate kitchen to Kasama that they shot some of the later episodes in the season in, or if they used elements of the dining room. It's hard for me to say. You folks that know more or are Chicago natives or maybe even work at Kasama, you'll have to let me know down low in the comments. But yeah, just to kind of end this rant here, there's a quote from this guy named Andrew Wilkinson, and he's a founder. He took his company public, and he has this quote where he says, "If I had the ability to short founders who don't read, I would." And I'm going to go out on a limb here. This might be controversial, but I would make a slight alteration to that for us and say, if I could short chefs who don't go out to eat, I would. I think it's that important. No call, no show. Not great. Ugh, I really hate that Hulu does this, where it puts this shadow box thing on the bottom of the screen, the visual, when I'm trying to pause and show you folks something. 8:37 in episode 3 of season 2 of The Bear. Allow me to call attention to the box that's in the bottom of the screen here. This is a commercial or industrial plastic wrap box. I cannot stress this enough. If you cook at home and you want one of the easiest quality of life increases that you can have for yourself, go to a restaurant supply store, one that is open to the public, and get yourself one of these. Go to the grocery store and get the saran wrap stuff. It is horrendous to use that stuff. I mean, for a multitude of reasons. One, you buy one roll, and if you're cooking at home, if you're not making like boatloads of food and using it for everything, it's going to last you a long time. Two, the store-bought plastic wrap containers, they're so narrow and thin, and so you end up using more, I find, because you have to go multiple times just to get a wide enough sheet to cover like a brownie pan or like a pot. Thirdly, this plastic wrap actually sticks to itself the way that you want it to stick to itself. Other plastic wraps that you get at the store, sometimes they stick to themselves, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they stick to containers, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're just way too thick in a way that you don't need your plastic wrap to be thick. As long as you're going to keep safety in mind, because there is kind of a hefty blade that comes along the side of the box that you use to cut the plastic wrap, so make sure that you don't come in my comments saying that you cut yourself on the plastic wrap box. But yeah, couldn't recommend having the restaurant-sized plastic wrap box at home enough. It's the best. I mean, you folks will have to tell me if you've seen this before, this particular portrayal here, but the idea of having a Conroe grill set up for your breakfast items, top notch. Like that, this seems like such a no-brainer, and I don't know why it took so long for like breakfast sausages and pork belly and bacon to be done on a Conroe grill setup. For those that don't know, it's like a long Japanese grill where you typically put like binchotan turkle in here, and then you use these like movable racks that just get totally carbonized and black. It just seems like such a fun station to work, the grill station during breakfast.
My dad got it for me.
It's a Shushevsky thing. Courage and confidence leads to decision-making.
I think a lot of people draw similarities between chefs and like musicians, or chefs and like artists, like painters. I kind of empathize with something that I think we're seeing more of in the industry now, which is comparing chefs to athletes. And to me, like I can draw so many more correlations between like the need to perform and how your mental affects it, and how like if you're constantly like on addicted to something, and how there's like leadership principles and team dynamics that are at play, and the need to consistently get better at your craft and learning, and not to even mention the like physicality of working on a line. I don't know, it's a maybe small detail, but I like the call out here. Got ghosted. I would be lying if I said that I do not eat out like this, especially when I'm a solo diner in a city by myself and I just want to try all the things, even if it's going to cause me physical pain at the end of the afternoon. It's not just restaurants, right? Like seeing a new palette of ingredients can also be incredibly inspiring. That's why going to like a new city can also be really helpful, because that city might be on the water when you're more inland, or that city might be in a different climate where they have more fruits, or like it's winter for you and you happen to go somewhere where it's summer. And I think that can also be incredibly inspiring to just see different stuff and not be so stuck in the muck and the mire of whatever it is that you're constantly trying to grapple with on a creative basis.
You too.
We talked in one of the previous episodes about like doing the local farm tour, so you get a connection with the people who are sourcing your purveyor stuff. We also talked about the Marcus going to stage in Copenhagen and getting that connection through Carmen. And now we see Sydney making connections and like growing her network in the city of Chicago to make sure that she's homies with other people in the industry. And again, there are specific restaurants that get shout outs in this segment, which I love, but this whole montage is just like a little bit of a love letter and a tip to the hat to some of the other hardworking professionals that make the city go on the cuisine front. I get goosebumps watching this scene. Not far after this season getting filmed, there was like a car that crashed into the restaurant at Avec, which is like a Chicago staple. I used to live within walking distance of Avec, and that's because I had an apartment in the West Loop where that's where I would walk to work to go to my job at Grace when I was on the opening team there. And I remember taking my girlfriend there at the time, she's my wife now, and just having the chorizo stuffed dates and just having cocktails and just ordering off the menu and all getting all the specials, basically sitting at the bar. It is such a special restaurant. I'm so excited they highlighted Avec too, because from when you talk about like a longevity in the industry too, we just watched that montage of all of the restaurants closing, and Avec throughout the years, throughout multiple, like economic booms and busts, throughout COVID, it has managed to still crush it and be an awesome place to stop into. So if you're going to Chicago, Kasama and Avec, add them both to your list. I know after getting highlighted on the Bear, these restaurants don't need my help to get any more attention, but yeah, I'm just going to add another +1 to these recommendations.
Got 180 on the books, and it starts.
Okay, let's talk about pre-shift meetings, sometimes called a pre-service meeting. This will happen, let's just throw out a timeline here. So the restaurant opens at 5. This might be 4:15 or something like that, like within a reasonable amount of time before the restaurant actually opens. Front of house are usually the folks who are going to show up later than the kitchen team. And so these folks might have walked in around 2 p.m., right? And they have done some of their pre-work, whether it's polishing glasses or folding napkins or printing out new menus or, updating the website, going through the reservations. The pre-shift will almost always have somebody who's going to lead that meeting with some sort of printout. That printout includes what she just basically rattled off. So like the number of guests that are coming, any sort of notable guests that are coming, whether they have been Googled or not, it kind of depends on the restaurant. And if you're a guest that's gone out to eat at a restaurant and you've ever filled out the what is there a special occasion, or do you have any allergies, or is there anything that we need to know about, all of that stuff gets discussed during this pre-service meeting. You see that certain people have notepads out and they're going to write notes because depending on the way that the front of house runs in that restaurant, they might have individual sections that each individual person is responsible for. And all of this insight and information and preempting of who's coming in tonight can help that restaurant really over-deliver on the hospitality experience that they're going to be able to offer to the people that come in that night. Usually for the kitchen team, this is one of those like go time moments where like sauces are getting finished and people are getting finally set up and they're on the line and they're going from the prep kitchen to the main kitchen. And so sometimes the kitchen is involved in the pre-service meeting, but sometimes it's often like just the sous chef or just the person who's going to be running the pass or just the person who's going to be running expo joins the pre-shift meeting so they can have an insight into like, okay, cool, we have 4 gluten-free guests tonight, 2 vegetarians, stuff like that. It's not weird for somebody to potentially be doing work while this pre-shift meeting is happening. This person happens to be, I think, folding napkins as this is happening. And it just kind of gets everybody on the same page for like, is this going to be like a really intense night and we got to kind of be on? Or is this like more of a mellow, like it's just a normal day kind of day? It's one of the few like all hands meetings that happens in a restaurant, but it usually happens every day. It can be incredibly productive from a communicating information perspective. And again, the goal is like, this is in service of making sure all guests that come in have a better experience that night.
Thank you.
I do have a couple.
See, there's an example. So like the chef being a part of this meeting and being able to go over what has been updated on the menu and hearing it straight from that person can often be better than like the game of telephone that will sometimes happen if like, or it just saves you time from having to have a bunch of individual one-on-one conversations. So yeah, like I said, the chef is usually a part of these meetings.
Ray's picking them up right now. We're gonna do a short rib hummus.
And yeah, you'll do a tasting sometimes too at this point, if there's a new dish. And as you can see, it looks like there's 2 new presentations that are part of the menu tonight. And so this is also a great opportunity because, again, notice the timing. I talked about this being at like 4:15 where the restaurant opens at 5. This is like when all these components are reasonably done and the station is reasonably set up enough for the person with it, whose station this is coming off of to fire one of these so that front of house can taste it. And then when they try to pitch it to your table, they actually know what they're talking about and they know how to describe it. Said another way, this wouldn't make sense to do at like 10 in the morning when like, yes, front of house might be there doing some stuff, but it's not all front of house. And so you would have to say that conversation multiple times. And it might not have the station be set up all the way, or some of the mise en place might not even be done yet, right? Like if this is lamb that's been braising, it's like that is actually really detrimental because I can serve you the hummus and the parsley red onion salad and I can give you the pita, but like the lamb's missing. And so it might not make sense for people of like, why are you having this meeting so close to when you're opening? It's like, that's part of the reason why.
What's your profit share? Not like that. We're just, we're working together. Yeah.
Got it.
I mean, great call out, right? Like we talked about that in the section where I talked about like how this organizational structure is and what the articles of incorporation are. And is there a profit share? It's a great question. And I think, you know, I've certainly been in situations where like equity is on the table, but like, what does equity mean? What's the long-term plan for this business? When are we going to start to take profits out of the business? All of those sorts of questions are very, very important to ask, especially like you've heard 3 people mention bad partnership stories. And so, yeah, as big of an advocate as I am for finding partnerships in this industry and asking for help and not doing it all yourself, it's like making sure that you're like getting things in writing or like hiring a lawyer if you need to, or asking for advice from other mentors who might be able to guide you in a direction to make sure that you don't get burned. Like, that's what I want for you folks. So they don't technically say it in this scene, but I think that's supposed to be Craigslist and that's supposed to be culinary agents, just based on the colors that they decided to choose for these apps. You have to let me know if I'm wrong in the comments.
You're seriously not poaching it.
This scene is so funny to me, not because it doesn't happen, because it totally happens. It's just the way that it plays out so quickly on screen. I chuckled as I watched this the first time. I just think it's so funny watching the chef walk out with like flour all over his apron. Poaching, for those that don't know, and I know this applies to other industries too, but it's like if you go to another restaurant and you try to talk those line cooks into coming to your restaurant, aka needing to leave their current position in service of yours. They were not looking to go somewhere. Oftentimes there's like, hey, what are you currently making in your role? Okay, you're making $21 an hour. I'll pay you $23 an an hour if you come work for us. And it's like generally not seen as a good thing, especially in like hiring environments like are both portrayed in The Bear and that the industry is actually experiencing right now, where it's like good cooks are hard to find. And so if you have a good cook and somebody's going to come along and literally take that away from you, like that tends to be kind of a negative. There's also something kind of similar that happens on the employee side. And so let's say that this line cook doesn't happen to particularly enjoy this kitchen. On their days off, they will go stage somewhere else or be interviewing at other kitchens to try to say, hey, I'm interested in finding a new position without having given their 2-week notice, right, to the chef that they're currently working for. And then that can kind of be detrimental when like you don't know that your line cooks are looking to get a job somewhere else. And then all of a sudden they just like get up and leave. That can be frustrating too. Because yeah, there can absolutely be like a little bit of a mercenary culture in line cooking and being front of house as well. Okay, another potentially controversial take about this episode. I think the going out to eat, food tour, Sydney getting to experience all these restaurants and all these cuisines and all these ingredients scenes of this episode got all the love. And I think understandably so. It was like absolutely what you want when you're kind of like going out and hanging out with industry people and getting the like extra bonus stuff and getting to be able to talk to people and talk to the chefs and getting to see inside the walk-in at what the beef looks like. That's all great. But I have never seen the dish creation, aesthetic, plating process be visualized in this way, bringing in all the inspirations of like architecture and color and ingredients and things that I saw at this one restaurant done in this way, portrayed on screen ever. And I am such a big fan of how they decided to portray this with like, well, I think I want it to be a square ravioli, but no, maybe it should look like agnolotti, but no, maybe it should be like a little packet, like a wrapped piece of candy. And then maybe it should be a linear plate up, or no, maybe it should be a circle, or no, maybe it should go side to side. The way that they show this, how it's like just a little flash of something and then it disappears. Or like you see something and then you like it, so then you continue to build on it. It's like so cool. I've never seen this played out on video like this. And when I saw this, I was like, these people get it. These people see how dish creation actually works. Because yeah, it's a flash from a cookbook. And all of a sudden it's red and has truffles on it with herbs. And it's this unconnected set of ideas that doesn't even make sense. But even if someone asked you to like strapped you to a chair and like told you, I need you to tell me exactly how you connected all these ideas, you probably couldn't even do it. And that's how it feels sometimes when you come up with a dish. And it's messy and you bring in your own personal experience to it. And it's not going to work the first 4 times you try it. And you're going to, for some reason, put like pine nuts and truffles and powdered sugar on this dish all together with 4 different shapes of pasta. But then you're ultimately going to land on something that you like. That works.
Yeah, thank
Awesome.
you.
Yeah, for sure.
so
No,
much for
we're hiring if this doesn't work out.
Another Chicago legend here. This is Chef Dave Posey. So remember that restaurant I had talked about called Avec? Well, that is part of a restaurant group that a chef called Paul Kahn owns, and that he had a restaurant that was right, in the same neighborhood called Blackbird. And Dave Posey ran Blackbird for the longest time as kind of like the chef de cuisine, and he had one of the coolest, like most affordable 3-course pre-fee menus back in the day. This is like 2012, 2013. And it was such a cool experience being able to go eat his food. Since then, Chef Dave and his wife have opened a restaurant called Elska in Chicago, and they have gotten all the accolades and all the awards. I have not personally been, again, myself, but to see him get a shout out and also, quote unquote, try to poach Sydney is reasonably hilarious. It's super cool that, again, like they're just like, hey, I'm going to call up Chef Dave Posey and use the Elska kitchen to do some R&D in. I think it's awesome. All right, so the pasta that Sydney is making on screen right now is called agnolotti. And so this got pretty popular after Thomas Keller kind of featured it across a bunch of his tasting menus. There's some other chefs in New York that popularized it too, but it basically requires rolling out a sheet of fresh pasta, and then you pipe farce down that sheet of pasta. You roll it over. It has to be wet enough dough that it sticks to itself, and then you pinch individual little pockets of the pasta, and then you use a roller to both kind of like make it a tight little pocket, but then you also cut individual stuffed pieces of agnolotti. It's labor intensive because every single piece you're touching, there is no sort of mold or press that you're working with. You need to make sure that your pasta dough has the right consistency. You need to make sure that you have just the right amount of farce in each one. You can even see that in one of the previous scenes where she was piping it, there was like gaps in between, so there was like air pockets that she would have experienced, which also makes it really difficult because you don't want a agno that has been pinched that doesn't have any farce inside of it. Also, you're seeing her struggle here with like the cutter, and the pasta looks a little bit too dry because there's too much flour on it. It requires a lot of skill to make agno, and that's why it's really impressive when you go to a restaurant and they are serving it. actually looks pretty good. What is that quote on creativity? It's the one where like your taste is higher than your ability. I'll leave it down low in the description if you want to read the whole thing. But it's this idea that like, you know what good looks like and you know what you're trying to shoot for. You just can't seem to execute it yet. And so what you're making doesn't align with what you know in your mind that you could create. And I think that's maybe kind of what's being portrayed here on screen. Because like the visual that we just saw that is coming out of presumably her mind is not what she played it up. And so it's like, where's the, why is there the delta there? And why didn't she execute on that vision? We saw the over acidified component. We saw the over salted component. The pasta texture didn't look like the worst. And there was like beautiful brown butter bits glazing the whole thing. But it's like that dish in and of itself where it was like oil and pasta and brown butter. It was like, there wasn't anything probably to add acid there. There wasn't any additional texture for the pasta. And it's not to say that like a pasta dish that simple can't work. I'm just curious to hear, like they didn't explicitly say what she didn't like about this execution. And yeah, I've totally been there where like you just try and try and try again and you just can't get a good one out. It's like that swing and a miss feeling that is just not good. And they don't explicitly say this, but this has to come into play when like no one's applying to come work for me either. And it's like, so I can't make a dish. I can't attract staff. My boss doesn't even want to like hang out and eat with me. It's like Sydney's in kind of a dark place right now. So with that, as per usual, don't forget to like and subscribe. My name is Justin Khanna. I will see you in episode 4. Thanks so much for being with me, and I hope you have a good one.